Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Here to provide, I think, an exciting update to my Trans Taiga plan. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll remember that 2 years ago, I had made plans to go up and do the Trans Taiga Road in Quebec, Canada with my friend Dennis. In fact, I put together a pretty extensive planning video on that trip, and you can see that here. Now, ultimately, we didn't get to go on that trip because of fires in the area, and we had to defer, and then last year it didn't happen, and so when 2025 rolled around, I told Dennis, this is the year. Now, if you're not familiar with what the Trans Taiga Road is and its history, let's go back to past year for a quick recap. Simply put, the Trans Taiga Road is a road in northern Quebec. And when you reach the end of that road, when you go as far as you can drive, you're closer to Labrador than where you started at the beginning of the road. You're also 745 kilometers or 462 miles from the nearest point of civilization. That makes it the furthest you can drive in North America on publicly accessible roads and be the furthest from people. It's the most remote place in North America you can drive to without having access to special gates or roads from an oil or Hydro-Quebec. So that's the what, but why? I don't have a good explanation. It's there. The draw of this place is its sheer remoteness and emptiness. Just to get to the start of the Trans Taiga Road, you first have to drive up the James Bay Road. And the James Bay Road is the longest service-free stretch of road in Canada, the second in North America. Only the Dalton Highway and up in Alaska beats it out. The Trans Taiga Road was built by Hydro-Quebec in the 1970s after they acquired the land from some, I call it dodgy, actions from the Native Americans. The road was put in to build 7 generating stations and the dams that support those generating stations for the tune of $17.5 billion. Those 7 generating facilities generate more than 15 gigawatts of power for Quebec. Astonishingly, that's nearly half of the load of Quebec. The Trans Taiga Road is still used today to service all of that infrastructure. And in fact, I'm sure we'll see Hydro-Quebec trucks up there. This trip and the plan that I'm about to go over took a tremendous amount of work. And while this is the first planning video, there will be more before the trip where I go over preparations and considerations for things like tires and fuel and cooking and tents and kind of everything that goes into a 9-day trip like this. All right, all that said, let's jump into what the actual plan is. Now that we're all on the same page, let's talk about the differences to that original plan that I had to what we'll be doing this year. The biggest change is that instead of using my 5th gen 4Runner, I'll be using our Winnebago Revel that I bought this year. And if you're not familiar with that, you can see this video here for a full overview of what that is. Beyond the capability of the vehicle in terms of like, I get to sleep in it, we can cook in it, it'll be a pretty comfortable ride. I made sure that the very first upgrade that I did for that Winnebago Revel was increasing the size of the fuel tank. We went from having the 25-gallon fuel tank to a 40-gallon fuel tank. And so what that means is that we will be able to go up to 600 miles on a single tank, and I should not have to carry all of these ancillary fuel tanks I was gonna have to carry before. But let's go over what the plan will be in 2025. Now, I've started to put together this book outlining everything. I'm going to go over a few things, but all of this information comes from a website that I want to give all the credit to, and that's jamesbayroad.com. You can go there and you can get kilometer by kilometer detailed descriptions for both the James Bay Road and the Trans Taiga Road of where you can stop to fish, where there are campgrounds, where there is fuel. And I've actually gone through and printed out those, and I've got it here. And this book will come with us, and I'm marking out where we're staying and that sort of thing. So that's a great resource if you want to do this trip, and I highly recommend you go there. To get to what we'll be doing on our trip. Okay, so our plan is to do this over a holiday in June known as Juneteenth here in the States, and we will be taking off on the Tuesday prior to that holiday after work. So I will leave from here in Maine, and I will drive up to Mont Tremblant, and Dennis, who's still going to join me, will drive from Canandaigua, New York, near Rochester, up to Mont Tremblant. We will find a place to leave his vehicle, and then the next morning we take off on the trip. The second day of the trip, we're calling it the second day, so Wednesday, we will leave Mont Tremblant, we'll drive all the way up to Matagami, all the way up the St. James Bay Road,
and then we're going to hit mile 37 on the Trans Taiga Road. There's a campground there. That'll be our first day. It's 746 miles. So it is a very long day of driving, and there's some good fishing spots on the way. So we're going to try to get out pretty early. I'm expecting basically to go from sun up to sundown in the car. We'll set up camp, maybe have a drink or two, and then get ready for the next day. That next day is a pretty long one. We're going to start at mile 37 at that campground, go all the way out to the end of the road, which is kilometer 666, all the way back, and then camp along the St. James Bay Road at kilometer 203. That third day will be 665 miles. So again, another very long day. Well, again, we'll just camp out in the van. And the next day, we will drive from there down to Matsugami Lake at the south end of the St. James Bay Road. That'll be a shorter day at just 315 miles. And we will use that day to kind of stop along the way and do a lot more fishing. And it seems like there's a lot of really good river spots along the James Bay Road. So we'll do some exploring that day and maybe rest up a bit. Day 5, we will leave from Matsugami Lake Campground and head back to Mont Tremblant, where we'll have an Airbnb. Now, we do have the camper van, and you might be thinking, why are you getting an Airbnb? Pretty simple. We want a place where you can sleep in beds, take hot showers, and rest up. Also, there's a Scandinavian spa, and we want to make sure we have an opportunity to enjoy that. I've done several videos on that spot. Absolutely love it. That day will be 310 miles as we head back to Mont Tremblant. And the last day, day 6, we'll depart one another. Dennis will drive all the way back to Canandaigua in New York, and I will drive back to Sebago Lake in Maine. I noted fuel usage, and fuel usage is very important. And so I put together a matrix to make sure I was not going to go over the 600-mile limit. You can see it here, but I have planned out all of our fuel stops. Basically, I will fill up when I leave the house. I will stop before I go over the border into Canada, fill up at Mont Tremblant, fill up in Matsugami, which is the last major town before we head up the St. James Bay Road. There's a fuel station on the James Bay Road that we will make sure we stop and fuel up at. And then on the Trans Taiga Road, there's a place called Mirage Outfitters. And that is one of the only spots to get diesel on the road. If you're just up there as a civilian, there are other places if you're working up there. I think there's also an airport you can stop at, but the hours are very limited. So for my purposes, it'll just be Mirage Outfitters that will hit both coming and going. And with all those stops, I won't even cross 400 miles on a single tank, which means I should not go below a quarter of a tank on this entire trip. Fingers crossed. All right, that's the plan for my 2025 Trans Taiga trip with Dennis. It's happening in June. It's definitely happening this year, and I'm very much looking forward to it. If you want to follow along and you want to see that adventure, make sure you subscribe below. And if you want to see that original planning video that I did, that is really useful if you're going up in just a vehicle or a 4Runner or a 4x4, you can click here. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.